Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. Wow, remember when Christopher Luxon nicked off out of the country when he was the opposition leader and he went over to Singapore and did a fake handshake? Then he went to Dublin, did some embarrassing things with a rugby ball. And then when he went to England, nobody wanted to meet him. They were all too busy. And he gave a shocking speech at the Policy Exchange. Well, that drew headlines at the New Zealand Herald and in other newspapers, including Newsroom, this one here. And there was a lot of public awareness that the leader of the opposition was travelling and he was developing policy of his own. Claire Trevitt wrote an entire article about the first 6 months of the great new opposition leader, Christopher Luxon, and there was a great deal of promotion. In fact, they got to the point, I think, in election year where the opposition dominated all of the headlines at the New Zealand Herald, Television New Zealand, other media outlets in our mainstream, and the government was reduced to fighting for column space because everyone was so excited about Christopher Luxon, who owned 7 houses, and we just had to get to know him, and he was traveling around and he was doing amazing things. He had so much energy, boundless energy, and energy and optics and everything were much more important than anything else. So welcome to today. Sleepy old New Zealand Herald hadn't actually changed a single item of their news, and it dawned on me that Thomas Coughlan was pretty slow. You know, maybe he was sleeping in. Breakfast on television was how I found out that Chris Hipkins wasn't in the country anymore, because nobody in the press had informed me, or maybe I just missed it and you all knew. But Chris Hipkins is over in Dublin and then in Denmark looking at progressive economic policies. Here's the clip from Breakfast where Carmel Sepuloni told us all the news.
For Chris Hipkins, who is where?
He's actually gone overseas, Dublin and Denmark, I believe. He's looking at progressive economic policy and sustainability initiatives. You know, when we're in opposition, this is an opportunity to actually explore options and to look at potential policy ideas.
So then, after this, there was a brief discussion because Chris Hipkins wasn't here, and Jenny May asked about the rising debt that so many New Zealanders are now finding themselves getting into as they have to borrow just to make ends meet, put food on the table, pay the rent, do all those sorts of things. Particularly if you're in a low income. Under this government, things have got so much worse after they promised to fix it all, and you know, people voted for them in Auckland, particularly in Western Auckland and South Auckland. People changed their vote and thought that Christopher Luxon, because he'd got so much coverage, so many headlines from the New Zealand Herald when he was the leader of the opposition, and Television New Zealand and everybody else, that all this would be fixed by now. But here's Carmel and what she had to say about that.
But if people are borrowing just to cover the basics, you know, the food, rent and power, what is the solution here? What will Labor specifically target in order to get relief for some of those families?
We need to, you know, primarily be focused on incomes here. We've got a good track record of having lifted the minimum wage and having had, you know, record lows unemployment. You know, those are the things that we need to be focused on. This government hasn't been focused on that. More Kiwis out of work, Kiwis earning less, and now more Kiwis in debt.
So yes, they've been punching down, they've been taking money away from low-income people. Low-income women had all their pay equity money stolen by this government in the most recent budget. The minimum wage increases have been crap. Everyone's actually moving backwards against inflation. Things aren't keeping up under this government, and Christopher Luxon's a big fail. He's really, really broken his promise to all of those voters. Somehow or another, Labor, you know, wasn't getting any headlines. And then suddenly at 10 o'clock this morning, I noticed, a headline, something worthy of news at the New Zealand Herald. Surely it's not something negative about Labor, is it? This was the headline. Yes, so apparently only negative things make the news when it comes to Labor at the New Zealand Herald these days. Otherwise, they just don't get any column space or attention. And this negativity came from the fact that it's scrutiny week, as you all know. And this morning, David Seymour was pontificating about regulations, and the regulations agent said that he'd basically handpicked and appointed people to kind of bring about a sort of libertarian skewed view of what is good law and good regulation. And he said some crazy things, which made Deborah Russell swear under her breath, for fuck's sake. You may recall that Brooke Van Velden used a lot of vigour and force behind the C word, the actual C word, uttered it in Parliament. And the Speaker, Jerry Brownlee, saw no need at all to ask her to apologise for using those words in Parliament. It was perfectly okay. It was the new standard. Everyone accepted that. And everyone in the National Party rode the high horse, overlooking that use of that word. So when Deborah Russell said, for fuck's sake, that's kind of like a B-class swear word compared to the A-class C word Van Velden got away with without any kind of need to apologise. But this is the Labour Party, and there's a different rule for them that's much more punitive, and everyone was shocked, especially David Seymour, and they needed apologies. Here's what happened.
Fair point.
I'm sorry, what was the unparliamentary outburst? Would Deborah Russell
It was
like
something
to
I
tell
should
us?
have kept under my breath.
Well, just tell. People would like
I
to know.
believe I said,
what
for
did you
fuck's
say?
sakes, in response to something you said.
Well,
and it
that's
was
the
unparliamentary and I shouldn't have said it.
well, that's
Okay.
that's the standard
Okay.
of the Labour Party. They're
So-
swearing already.
So, Dr. Russell, you've withdrawn and apologised for that comment?
I have.
Okay.
This got even worse because Seymour was actually trying to suggest that when he's being inaccurate and incorrect in the things that he says, he likes to argue the point and say, well, maybe I just wasn't precise. And then Duncan Webb said, well, maybe you're just talking shit. Oh, wow. Imagine the horror of it all as ACT MPs who had previously used the C word without any problem at all suddenly stood on their chairs in complete horror at the terrible S word. Here's what happened.
Go back. Do you want to correct that, or are you going to keep saying something which is not accurate?
Well, I think you could argue it's something that's not precise. However,
Well, I would call it making shit up, actually.
Okay, hang on.
well, excuse me,
Order.
excuse me,
Order.
Mr.
Can we-
Chair. Can we just hear what this Labour minister has just said?
I'm going to
no,
give
you
Dr. Duncan Webb the opportunity to withdraw and apologise for his swearing.
The standard we walk by is the standard we accept in this parliament. We've already
I
established.
apologise for swearing.
And it got to this exchange during the select committee where Seymour throws up his hands and says, you know what, Dunk, you got me. You know, we're trying to put Bryce Wilkinson from the Atlas Network think tank, the NZ Initiative, onto the board that does these interviews with public servants. Here's what happened.
I guess my point is this. Are you just going to appoint to this board regulatory economists like Bryce Wilkinson, who essentially have a political axe to grind?
Well, a couple of things there. First of all, I don't appoint the board if the bill is to pass Parliament.
That's actually what the bill says, but I know the cabinet procedure.
Yes, well, if you know cabinet procedure, then you'll be well aware that the bill provides for cabinet to appoint the regulatory
The
standards.
bill provides for you to appoint them, but I understand the cabinet procedure, which is you would get your cabinet colleagues' approval.
Yes, so that's not really me appointing them because the other cabinet colleagues could veto a decision or approve a decision. It would seem that they're making the decision. So you either understand cabinet procedure or you don't. The second point I would make is that, you know what, Duncan, you got me. I admit, have been taking advice from one of, if not New Zealand's best regulatory economists, and he's been giving it to us entirely for free because he cares about public policy.
Well, not only that.
It is that bad.
It
not really is that bad.
But someone from a lobby group called the New Zealand Initiative has been sitting on interview panels for public servants.
Well, first of all, they're not a lobby group; they're a think tank, and it's not and it's not unusual. It's not unusual for an expert, an outside expert, to sit on an interview panel. It's a normal public
and have lunch
service
dates
process.
and coffee catch-ups.
I beg your pardon?
And have lunch dates and coffee catch-ups.
You've got us again. Yes, we have been having lunch and coffee. You've got us
Yeah.
red-handed.
Okay,
So as you can see, Seymour was playing that whole, oh, it's just a conspiracy game again when it comes to his links to these people. But, you know, what we're really seeing here is this creeping cronyism, the influence, the hand of the Atlas Network creeping into our very agencies as Seymour sets himself up to frame and see everything early, see all the regulations, frame up things in public early, have his people from the Atlas Network in there embedded into the system, and just pretend that it's actually all just big scary stuff that you know, we're being ridiculous about. You know, there's no need for oversight. Go back to sleep, my children, go back to sleep. David Seymour can be trusted. So we're seeing that kind of thing carrying on in these Scrutiny Week select committees. I think one of the other pieces of news that really shocked us all this morning was the way in which, when we talk about neoliberal Atlas Network ideology, Simeon Brown had sent a letter of expectation to Lester Levy some time ago, back in March, but it's only just come out now. And it shows that right from the start, the ruthless, libertarian, Atlas-orientated Minister of Health, whose main qualification is that he was a bank clerk, had always intended to have these long-term contracts for privatising surgeries in our public health system, making our public health system permanently privatised. And this is not something he had talked to anyone about or he had a mandate to do. And in fact, everyone had expected that the only reason you'd do this kind of privatising of surgeries was a short stopgap measure. But the intention here from Brown, who had redacted all the information about all the risks of the kind of things he's doing with privatisation to the public health system because he didn't want anyone to see it, had always intended for this privatisation of public health to be the norm, the long term. This was quite shocking, and this is what the Labour spokesperson for health, Dr. Aisha Viral, had to say.
This indicates a direction that private provision will become part of the normal arrangements for elective surgery in New Zealand, not just a stopgap to clear backlogs.
Also, the chair of the Aotearoa Royal Australian College of Surgeons, Dr. Ros Poshan, had deep concerns about what was now happening because this isn't what was expected. This is just something that Simeon Brown's neoliberal privatisation agenda had kept under the radar with Lester Levy, and now it was out of the bag. And so this is what Ros Poshan had to say.
We were sold outsourcing as a short-term solution to a backlog, and in that situation it's been moderately successful. The same points we've made again and again still apply, and that is that outsourcing is not a solution to an inadequately funded health system. It is much cheaper to actually just appropriately resource the public hospitals. What you're doing with these long-term contracts is you're getting places like Southern Cross and the other private hospitals who are saying, well, I need to invest in infrastructure to provide care. Why don't we just invest in infrastructure to provide care in the public system where we already have hospitals?
So yes, that was the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons expressing their deep, deep concern about the expensive and stupid privatisation ideology that you may have voted for if you voted for National out of resentment, especially, you know, in big cities like Auckland, you know, where people had voted for change. I mean, how embarrassing. Many people that listen to G News say they can't even find anyone that will admit now that they voted for change when you see this kind of thing happening. But it got worse. One of the things that really got repeated to death by Christopher Luxon was he was going to restore law and order. Law and order was the second top priority after fixing the economy, which hasn't been fixed, has it? So number one, he didn't fix the economy. Things are worse for everybody right now. And number two, he was going to restore law and order. But during the select committee yesterday, Jenny Anderson was on fire as she prosecuted the hapless Minister for Police, Mark Mitchell, slow-moving, slow-talking Mitchell, who had basically only excuses for a raft of questions about where are the 500 new police that you promised going into the election would be here in November this year. Where are those 500 police? Here's what happened yesterday.
So far, you've delivered 45 more police. When will you achieve the 500?
Well, I can assure that member that we will achieve the 500. There's obviously been a big focus and a return to standards, which I think is critically important. The police have responded very well. The incoming commissioner has initiated the fact that we're now going to have a second training facility in Auckland, which is definitely going to help with achieving the 500. But in fairness to my, and out of respect to my associate, Casey Costello, it is her delegation in the police portfolio, and so I'll allow her to speak in more detail around the delivery of the 500.
So there was nothing convincing but shifting the blame from Mitchell when it came to the 500 new police. And excuses, but he'd broken a promise here. And then it just got worse because, he couldn't account for just about anything that was happening in police. What about these standards that had slipped?
Who gave the order to drop standards at the police college in order to try and deliver the 500 quicker?
I don't think there was any. That is very operational, but just from my own viewpoint as minister, I don't think that there was any specific orders ever to drop standards. I think under the previous government, there was obviously.
Why was it then that 128 recruits proceeded without meeting standards?
I can comment on that. I mean, that has come to my attention in terms of the literacy standard, and as I have since said publicly in the media, there is an expectation that they meet the required literacy standard before they go to their police college, and that's the way that we'll be applying it going forward.
So in the budget, it has performance measures, and I note that police performance measures have all been updated. Why have those standards been lowered under your watch?
Well, we haven't lowered any standards around.
Yes, you have lowered standards. You've reduced the percentage of victimisations to be resolved within a year. It was greater than 35%. It's now greater than 25%. You've also lowered the threshold for the total number of victims recorded within the year. That's changed from 52 to 53,000 to fewer than 65. The reason provided in the budget documents is police is working towards having fewer victims recorded. But are you meeting fewer victims simply by lowering police standards?
No, not at all. Police will never lower their standards, and quite the opposite, that we've set ourselves a target for.
Jenny Anderson was hot on the trail of the fact that in order to meet the targets that had been set by this government to reduce the number of victimisations of violent crime, the government was lowering standards in order to meet their targets. Here's what happened.
Can I ask you again, why have you decreased the target of victimisations where an investigation is finalised within a year from 35% to 25%?
Well, that will be an internal matter for police.
No, that's agreed between the Commissioner and you in the budget.
Well,
you did that.
Again, that is an internal matter for police, but I
no,
want
it's not.
The police will give advice on how they set their targets and what they
These performance measures are agreed between the Minister and the Commissioner. You have lowered more than 5 of these, and you need to explain to us why you have lowered standards for performance measures.
Well, we haven't. I can assure you that we have not lowered standards for performance measures with police. Police have in fact quite the opposite.
In the budget. Are you meeting the Prime Minister's goal of 20,000 fewer victims of violent crime simply by lowering police standards for reporting?
No, not at all. That's a justice survey.
And then there was the shoplifting. If you went into a supermarket, you could actually walk out with $499 worth of goods, and the police had kind of agreed at a superintendent level under the watch of this Police Commissioner Chambers that it was okay, just because, no one's going to chase that. There was no chance of getting it back. So police just put their feet up on the desks and failed to even show up at such small value crimes, retail crimes. And retail crimes are up. Here's what happened.
Why did a police superintendent issue a national directive not to investigate shoplifting under $500?
Well, I think we've litigated this, to death. Is that it was recognised that it was probably a poorly worded internal memo.
So overall, you can see Christopher Luxon's government has failed to fix the economy. People are going into all sorts of debt. People at the bottom are being targeted again. There's a whole lot of punching down on them. Minimum wages haven't kept up. People have absorbed a whole lot of credit card debt and are in real trouble now as prices are just going up. Rates are increasing. Electricity's been up this year. The price of butter is through the roof under Nicola Willis. We're privatising our health system. People can't afford to go to the doctor. People can't get an appointment with one anymore under this government. People are basically going to die when they didn't need to, because ultimately the public health system will crumble and no one's listening to the doctors or the surgeons. The media, particularly the ones that are taken over by the Canadian billionaires and the tinfoil hat people, aren't reporting anything positive about the opposition like they did only a couple of years ago when National were in opposition, when National dominated all of the headlines, and Christopher Luxon was the main person that got his photo in all of the headlines at the New Zealand Herald. And under the careful watch of Thomas Coughlan, everything's pretty sleepy when it comes to balance. 100% National Party positive, 100% Labour Party negative headlines is what we're kind of seeing at the moment. So I'm not seeing anything positive about Christopher Hipkins and what he's doing over in Ireland, over in Denmark at all, are you? No, we're just hearing about swearing, and swearing was the big diversion away from the pay equity. They're using the diversion at the moment again in the media to try and make us not really see the facts, that are going on in front of us during scrutiny week, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. So anyway, I hope you have a good day. I'll be back this evening with another podcast, and we'll see you all a bit later on. Have a wonderful afternoon.